I'm Amelia Wright, 27, and last month I became a stranger at my own sister's engagement party. You're not family anymore, Natalie spat, her words cutting through the ambient chatter like glass. The room didn't go silent, but those who heard froze, champagne flutes suspended midair. What Natalie didn't know was that beneath my simple dress and minimal jewelry lay the success I'd kept hidden for years. It wasn't until she saw my black card that her tune changed completely. Before I continue this story, I'd love to know where you're watching from. Drop it in the comments, hit that subscribe button, and let me know if you've ever had family turn on you just to come crawling back when circumstances changed. Growing up in the Wright family meant navigating a specific set of expectations. We weren't wealthy, but solidly middle class. My father Michael worked as a bank manager while my mother Karen taught elementary school. From the outside, we looked like the perfect American family with our matching Christmas sweaters and annual beach vacations to the same resort in Florida. But beneath that carefully crafted veneer lay the complicated truth of our dynamics. From an early age, it was clear that my sister Natalie and I were fundamentally different. 3 years my senior, Natalie embodied everything my parents valued. She was sociable, conventionally pretty, and most importantly, compliant. She followed the path laid out for her without question: cheerleading, student council, nursing school at the state university, and dating boys my parents approved of. Her life choices were celebrated at every turn, each achievement marked with parties and proud Facebook posts. I, on the other hand, was always the odd one out. While Natalie thrived in social situations, I preferred the company of books and computers. My parents viewed my introverted nature as something to be fixed rather than understood. "Why can't you be more like your sister?" became the background music of my childhood, playing at varying volumes depending on how far I strayed from their script. "Amelia has so much potential if she'd just apply herself," my mother would say to relatives, as though I weren't sitting right there. What she meant was, if only I would apply myself to the things they valued. My straight A's in math and science were acknowledged with brief nods, while Natalie's B-minuses in more appropriate subjects like literature were displayed proudly on the refrigerator. By high school, the division had become even more pronounced. While Natalie went to prom with the football captain, I joined the robotics club and started teaching myself to code. My parents viewed my interests with a mixture of confusion and disappointment. "This computer phase will pass," my father would say, patting my shoulder awkwardly as I worked on programming projects late into the night. It wasn't that they were cruel people, they simply couldn't understand a daughter whose passions and talents lay so far outside their realm of experience. They loved me, but they didn't know how to support someone they couldn't understand. College became my escape. I received a partial scholarship to study computer science at a university 3 states away. My parents were reluctant to let me go so far, but the reduced tuition costs ultimately won them over. The distance gave me room to breathe and grow for the first time in my life. While Natalie settled into a nursing job 20 minutes from our childhood home and began dating men my parents approved of, I was building a new life far from their watchful eyes. It was during my sophomore year that I developed the algorithm that would eventually become the foundation of my company. What began as a class project evolved into something with genuine commercial potential. By graduation, I had secured angel investment and was working on my startup full-time. The early years were grueling, 18-hour days, living on ramen, and pouring every penny back into the business. During this time, my communication with my family dwindled. They knew I was doing something with computers, but I deliberately kept the details vague. Years of having my ambitions dismissed had taught me to protect my dreams from their judgment. When my mother would call and ask how I was doing financially, I'd assure her I was getting by rather than sharing my growing success. When Natalie would boast about her promotion to head nurse on family calls, I'd congratulate her enthusiastically while saying little about my own accomplishments. It wasn't exactly lying, but it was a careful curation of the truth. By the time I turned 26, my company had gone through 2 successful funding rounds and was valued at over $50 million. I had moved from my cramped studio to a spacious loft apartment, traded my thrift store wardrobe for designer pieces, and could afford luxuries I'd never dreamed of growing up. But to my family, I was still just Amelia who was doing okay with her computer job. It wasn't that I was ashamed of my success, quite the opposite. But I had watched how money changed the dynamics within our extended family. When my uncle came into a windfall after selling his business, suddenly everyone needed loans and favors. He went from being the black sheep to the family ATM overnight. I wasn't interested in becoming that for the rights. There was also a part of me, a part I'm not particularly proud of, that was waiting for the right moment to reveal the truth. After years of being underestimated and overlooked, I fantasized about showing them just how wrong they'd been about me. The invitation to Natalie's engagement party arrived during a particularly busy quarter. My company was preparing to launch a new product, and I was working around the clock. It had been nearly 8 months since I'd been home, with most family interactions limited to brief video calls on holidays. The invitation was thick, cream-colored cardstock, clearly expensive, announcing Natalie's engagement to Jason Bennett, a surgeon she'd been dating for just under a year. My mother called the day after the invitation arrived. "We really hope you can make it this time, Amelia," she said, the implication being that I had missed other important family events. "Jason comes from a very respectable family, and it would mean a lot to your sister if you could be there." What she didn't say, but I heard clearly, this is important because these people have money and status. Show up and don't embarrass us. Despite everything in me wanting to decline, I found myself booking a flight home. Perhaps some part of me still craved their approval, or maybe I was finally ready to let them see who I'd become. Either way, 2 weeks later, I was packing a simple but elegant dress, deliberately choosing to leave my usual accessories, the ones that might hint at my wealth, at home. If they were going to see the real me, I wanted it to be on my terms, not because I was flaunting status symbols. The night before the party, I lay awake in my hotel room. I declined to stay at my parents' house, citing a need for workspace, wondering if I was making a mistake. Maybe some doors are better left closed. But it was too late to back out now. Natalie's engagement party awaited, and with it, a family confrontation years in the making. The Bennett family had spared no expense for their son's engagement celebration. The party was being held at the Westbrook, one of the most exclusive venues in my hometown, the kind of place my family would have driven past when I was growing up, my mother commenting wistfully about how the other half lives. Now, pulling up to the valet in my rental car, I felt like an imposter in two worlds, too successful for my family's narrative of me, yet deliberately understating that success. I had chosen my outfit carefully, a navy blue cocktail dress from a mid-range designer. Nice enough to be appropriate, not nice enough to raise eyebrows. My hair was pulled back in a simple updo, and I wore minimal jewelry. In my day-to-day life in New York, I dressed with more confidence, more flair. But here, I had reverted to a watered-down version of myself almost instinctively. Taking a deep breath, I handed my keys to the valet and approached the entrance. The venue was beautiful, all marble and crystal, with flower arrangements that probably cost more than my first month's rent after college. A string quartet played softly in the corner of the ballroom, and servers circulated with champagne and hors d'oeuvres. I spotted my parents immediately. My mother wore a new dress, I could tell from the way she kept smoothing it down, and my father looked uncomfortable in his suit, tugging at his collar when he thought no one was looking. They were engaged in conversation with an older couple I didn't recognize, my mother laughing a little too loudly, my father nodding with exaggerated interest. "Amelia." My mother's voice carried across the room when she finally noticed me. She excused herself and hurried over, air-kissing both my cheeks. "You made it." We were beginning to wonder. I had arrived exactly on time according to the invitation. The traffic from the hotel was heavier than I expected, I lied, not wanting to start an argument in the first 30 seconds. "Hotel? You could have stayed with us, you know that." She gave me a quick once-over, her expression revealing a mix of relief that I was presentably dressed and disappointment that I wasn't more impressive. "Well, come say hello to everyone. The Bennetts are just lovely people, really lovely. Jason's father is chief of surgery at Memorial." As she guided me through the crowd, I felt eyes on me, relatives I hadn't seen in years, friends of Natalie's I vaguely recognized, and strangers who were clearly trying to place me in the social hierarchy of the event. My mother's running commentary didn't help. "There's your cousin Lisa, she just had her second baby, you know. And that's Dr. Thomas Bennett, Jason's father, such an accomplished man. Oh, and there's Aunt Patricia, she was just asking about you the other day, wondering what you're up to these days." What I was up to was running a multi-million-dollar tech company, but I simply smiled and nodded, allowing my mother to steer me physically and conversationally. "And what is it you do, Amelia?" Dr. Bennett asked when we were introduced, his handshake firm, his gaze evaluative. Before I could answer, my mother jumped in. "Amelia works with computers in New York. Very technical stuff." She laughed nervously. "We can hardly understand it ourselves." "I run a software company," I said, trying to reclaim my narrative. "We develop data security solutions for healthcare systems, actually." "How interesting," Dr. Bennett replied, though his tone suggested it was anything but. "Always good to have support staff who understand the technical side of things. Our hospital just upgraded all our systems last year." Support staff. Not CEO, not founder. I swallowed my correction along with a large sip of champagne. The conversation moved on, and soon I found myself deposited among a group of Natalie's friends while my mother fluttered off to other guests. I recognized a few faces from high school, girls who had been in Natalie's circle and largely ignored me. "So you actually live in New York City?" one of them asked, her tone suggesting I was claiming to live on Mars. "Isn't it dangerous?" "It's actually quite safe in my neighborhood," I replied, already tired of the small talk. "Is Natalie around?" "I haven't congratulated her yet." "She's over there with Jason and his family," another friend pointed toward the center of the room, where Natalie stood glowing in a blush pink dress, her arm linked with a tall, conventionally handsome man I assumed was Jason. I excused myself and made my way toward them, catching fragments of conversations as I passed. Never thought Amelia Wright would land a Bennett, but she always was the ambitious one. The sister lives somewhere out east, I think. Bit of a black sheep from what I hear. Must be hard for her, seeing her younger sister so settled while she's still single and working some tech support job or something. By the time I reached Natalie, I had constructed a mental armor against the barrage of misconceptions and judgments. My sister's eyes widened slightly when she saw me, surprised that I'd actually shown up, perhaps. "Amelia. You came." She embraced me briefly, the scent of expensive perfume enveloping me. "I want you to meet Jason. Honey, this is my sister I told you about." Jason Bennett had the confident handshake of someone who had never doubted his place in the world. "Nice to finally meet you. Natalie mentioned you work with computers?" Again with the vague computers description. "Yes, I run a cybersecurity company in New York," I said, directing my response to Jason but watching Natalie's reaction. There was a flicker of something, confusion? Disbelief? Before her pleasant smile reasserted itself. "How nice," she said, in exactly the tone one might use to acknowledge a child's crayon drawing. "Jason's just been made the youngest attending surgeon in his department's history. Isn't that amazing?" "Congratulations," I said sincerely. "That's quite an achievement." "It's really nothing," Jason replied, with the false modesty of someone who very much thought it was something. "Just a matter of putting in the hours. I'm sure your computer work keeps you busy too." The conversation continued in this vein, Natalie highlighting Jason's accomplishments while minimizing or ignoring anything I shared about my own life. It wasn't malicious exactly, more like she had decided on a narrative where she was the successful sister, and any evidence to the contrary was simply irrelevant. After a few minutes of this, I excused myself to get another drink. At the bar, I found a moment of peace, watching the party from a slight distance. My father was now speaking with Jason's father, nodding enthusiastically at whatever wisdom the surgeon was imparting. My mother was showing off Natalie's engagement ring to a circle of admiring women. Everyone had their role in this performance, and mine appeared to be less successful sister who moved away. "There's something, aren't they?" The Bennetts. I turned to find a woman about my age standing next to me at the bar. She had the same jawline as Jason, but her expression was wry rather than self-satisfied. "I'm Megan," she said, extending her hand. "Jason's sister and fellow family disappointment." "Amelia," I replied, immediately warming to her. "Natalie's sister and, apparently also a family disappointment, though that's news to me." Megan laughed. "I couldn't help overhearing your conversation earlier. For what it's worth, running a cybersecurity company sounds a lot more interesting than being an attending surgeon. At least to me." "Don't let your brother hear you say that," I said, smiling despite myself. "Oh, Jason and I have an understanding. He gets to be the golden child, and I get to actually enjoy my life." She raised her glass in a mock toast to disappointing our families by having the audacity to chart our own paths. I clinked my glass against hers, feeling for the first time that evening like I could breathe normally. But the moment of camaraderie was short-lived. Across the room, I could see my mother gesturing for me to join them as a photographer arranged Natalie, Jason, and their parents for formal pictures. "Duty calls," I said to Megan. "Nice to meet someone sane at this party." "Likewise," she replied. "Find me later if you need an escape hatch." As I crossed the room, I overheard two of my aunts talking in hushed tones. Always was the odd one. "Karen says she's still single, married to her job apparently." "Shame, she's not getting any younger." "What is she now, 30? 27, I think. But you know how it is in those big cities, everyone just focused on careers until it's too late." I straightened my shoulders and walked past them, pretending not to hear. The family photos were predictably awkward, me standing slightly apart from the main group, my mother constantly adjusting my position and expression. "Smile naturally, Amelia." "No, not like that. Stand up straighter. Maybe a little to the left?" By the time we were done, my cheeks hurt from forcing a smile, and I was counting the minutes until I could politely leave. But the worst was yet to come. The dinner portion of the evening began with a series of toasts. Jason's father stood first, champagne flute raised, commanding the attention of the room without effort, the confidence of a man accustomed to operating theaters and boardrooms. When Jason was a boy, Dr. Bennett began. "I told him that there are 3 pillars to a successful life: a distinguished career, a supportive community, and most importantly, a strong family foundation." He looked around the room, nodding solemnly. "The Bennett family has always valued tradition, excellence, and loyalty above all else. We work hard, we stand by our commitments, and we put family first." Murmurs of approval rippled through the crowd. I took another sip of champagne, wondering if anyone else noticed the implicit judgment in his words, the suggestion that those who didn't conform to these specific values were somehow lacking. "In Natalie," he continued, "Jason has found a partner who shares these essential values. Someone who understands the importance of family, tradition, and supporting each other through life's journey." More nods, more approving murmurs. My mother was practically glowing with pride, as if Dr. Bennett's approval was the highest currency imaginable. Several more toasts followed: Jason's best friend from medical school, Natalie's maid of honor, my father with a nervous but heartfelt speech about watching his daughter grow up. Finally, Natalie herself stood, radiant in her carefully selected engagement party dress. "I want to thank everyone for being here tonight," she began, her voice steady and practiced. "Jason and I are so blessed to have such wonderful friends and family supporting us on this journey." She proceeded to thank people individually: Jason's parents for welcoming her so warmly, her friends for their excitement and help with wedding planning, our parents for their love and guidance, Jason's sister for being so supportive despite her busy schedule, this with a slightly tight smile in Megan's direction. I waited for my name, for some acknowledgement of my presence or contribution, but it never came. Natalie thanked her college roommate, her childhood dance teacher, even the family dog, but somehow managed to complete her speech without once mentioning her only sister. The omission was so deliberate it couldn't be anything but intentional. Around me, I could feel people noticing, shooting curious glances my way. My cheeks burned, but I maintained my composure, clapping politely when the toast concluded. As dinner was served, I found myself seated at a table with distant relatives and Natalie's former co-workers, clearly not the priority table near the newly engaged couple. The conversation flowed around me, but I was only half listening, still processing the public snub. When the main course was cleared, I decided I needed to speak with Natalie. If this was how the engagement party was going, I could only imagine what the wedding would be like, if I was even invited. I found her near the dessert table, momentarily separated from Jason. "Natalie, could we talk for a minute?" I kept my voice low, not wanting to create a scene. She turned, her expression momentarily unguarded, irritation flashing across her features before she composed herself. "Amelia, I'm a little busy right now. Can it wait?" "It'll just take a minute," I insisted. I wanted to check in about the wedding planning. I'd love to help however I can. Natalie glanced around, then guided me a few steps away from the nearest guests. "Look, I appreciate you coming tonight, but let's be honest, you haven't been part of my life for years. You moved away, you barely call, you show up for holidays sometimes. Now suddenly you want to be involved in my wedding?" Her words stung, partly because there was some truth to them. I had distanced myself, though not without reason. "I know we haven't been close," I acknowledged, "but you're my sister. I want to be there for you. Where were you when Mom had her gallbladder surgery last year? Or when Dad turned 60? Her voice was rising slightly. "You sent a gift card, Amelia." "A gift card?" "I was in the middle of a major product launch," I explained, knowing how hollow it sounded. "I couldn't get away." "You couldn't get away for 2 days to see your father on his 60th birthday? Natalie's perfect engagement party mask was slipping. "That's exactly my point. Your computer job always comes first. You made your choice to prioritize work over family years ago." "That's not fair," I protested, feeling the conversation spiraling out of control. "You don't know anything about my life or my work." "Because you never share anything," she hissed. "You're so secretive about everything. For all we know, you could be struggling and too proud to admit it." "I'm not struggling," I said firmly. "My company is actually doing very well." Natalie rolled her eyes. "Sure, your little startup or whatever it is. Meanwhile, you don't even have a date to bring to my wedding. Is that what this is about? You're embarrassed that I'm single? It's about the fact that you abandoned this family." Her voice was definitely too loud now, drawing attention from nearby guests. "You think you're better than us with your New York life and your mysterious job. But family is supposed to be there for each other, through everything." "That goes both ways, Natalie," I shot back, my own temper flaring. "When was the last time you asked anything about my life? When have you ever supported my choices? Because your choices took you away from us." She was nearly shouting now. Several conversations had stopped as people turned to watch the unfolding drama. "I made choices that were right for me," I said, trying to de-escalate. "Just like you've made choices that were right for you." "Don't you dare compare us," Natalie snapped. "I built a life to be proud of. I stayed close to family. I found someone who values the same things I do. And I didn't?" The hurt was transforming into anger now. "Because my definition of success looks different than yours?" Natalie's face flushed red. "You know what? I don't even know why I invited you. You clearly don't want to be here, and I don't need your judgment ruining my engagement." "I'm not judging you, Natalie." "Save it," she cut me off. "This was a mistake. You're not family anymore, Amelia. You made that choice years ago when you walked away." The words hung in the air between us. Around us, the room hadn't gone completely silent, but those nearby had definitely heard. I saw my mother frozen halfway across the room, a look of horror on her face. Jason was making his way toward us, concern etched on his features. I felt as though I'd been slapped. Despite everything, I had never thought Natalie would say something so final, so cutting, and certainly not in public. Natalie, that's enough. Jason had reached us, his hand on his fiancée's arm. People can hear you. Of course, that was his concern, not what she'd said, but that others had heard it. Appearances above all. I think I should go, I said quietly, my voice steadier than I felt. Congratulations on your engagement. I turned and walked away, head high, refusing to give anyone the satisfaction of seeing me upset. As I moved through the crowd, I could hear the murmurs, feel the stares. My mother tried to intercept me, but I shook my head slightly. I couldn't handle her right now. All I wanted was to get out, to escape the judgment and the pain and return to the life I'd built for myself, a life that might not include traditional family, but one where I was valued for who I actually was. The exit couldn't come fast enough. I moved through the venue with as much dignity as I could muster, avoiding eye contact with curious onlookers. I just needed to get my coat and car, and then I could process what had just happened in private. The coat check attendant was a young man in a crisp uniform who smiled politely as I approached. Checking out early, ma'am? Yes, just need to collect my coat, I replied, handing him my claim ticket. He disappeared into the back room and returned moments later with my charcoal gray wool coat. There's also the matter of the valet service, he said apologetically. The Bennetts arranged for it to be charged to guests' rooms if they're staying at the hotel, but otherwise. Of course. Nothing could be simple tonight. I'm not staying at the hotel, I said. How much is it? $50, ma'am. We accept all major credit cards. I reached into my clutch and pulled out my wallet. I normally carried a more discreet card for everyday use, but I'd been traveling, and the only card I had with me was my American Express Centurion card, the infamous black card that required not just wealth but significant annual spending and an invitation to obtain. I handed it to the attendant, whose eyes widened slightly but professionally kept any other reaction in check. I'll be right back with your receipt, he said. As he processed the payment, I shrugged on my coat, already mentally on my way back to the hotel. I just needed to get through the next few minutes, and then this disastrous evening would be behind me. Is that what I think it is? I turned to find Jason standing a few feet away, his eyes fixed on the black card the attendant was now returning to me. Excuse me? I said, though I knew exactly what he was referring to. Jason stepped closer, his entire demeanor shifting from the condescending almost brother-in-law to something much more interested. That's an Amex Centurion card. They're invitation only. I slipped the card back into my wallet. Yes, it is. You need to spend hundreds of thousands annually even to qualify for an invitation, he continued, looking at me with new eyes. What did you say your company does again? Before I could answer, Natalie appeared at his side, her face still flushed from our argument. Jason, what are you doing? Let her leave if that's what she wants. Natalie, he said, his voice low but excited. Did you know your sister has a black Amex? A what? Natalie looked confused, then disbelieving as she processed his words. That's not possible. I just saw it, Jason insisted. Those aren't given to people with little startups. He turned back to me. What's the name of your company? I don't think you ever mentioned it. I hesitated, torn between the satisfaction of finally revealing the truth and the knowledge that it shouldn't matter, that my worth as a sister, as family, shouldn't depend on my financial success. Secure Health Technologies, I said finally. I'm the founder and CEO. Jason's eyes widened. Wait, Secure Health? The company that developed that revolutionary patient data encryption system? The one that just signed that huge government contract? I nodded, watching as Natalie's expression transformed from dismissive anger to shock. That's your company, she stammered. But you never said anything. You never asked, I replied simply. Jason was already pulling out his phone. Secure Health, my God, they were valued at what, $60 million in the last funding round? 78, I corrected quietly. That was before the government contract. Natalie's face had gone pale. Why didn't you tell us? All this time, we thought that I was struggling? That my computer job was some kind of administrative position? The bitterness I'd suppressed for years was seeping into my voice. Would it have mattered, Natalie? Would you have treated me differently if you'd known I was successful by your standards? Before she could answer, we were interrupted by the arrival of my parents and Dr. and Mrs. Bennet, drawn by the unusual tableau of the three of us huddled by the coat check. Is everything all right? My mother asked, her eyes darting anxiously between us. Amelia, you're not leaving already, are you? Amelia was just telling us about her company, Jason said, his voice carrying an unmistakable note of respect that hadn't been there earlier. Secure Health Technologies. Dr. Bennett's eyebrows shot up. Secure Health? The medical data security company? He turned to me with newfound interest. That's your company? Yes, I said, suddenly exhausted by the whole situation. Look, it's been a long evening. I really should go. But we've barely had a chance to talk, my mother protested, confusion written across her face. And what's this about a company? Mom, Natalie cut in, her voice strained. Amelia is apparently some sort of tech millionaire. She's been hiding it from us all this time. Millionaire? My father looked stunned. Amelia, is this true? I sighed. My company has been successful, yes. But that's not really the point, is it? Not the point? Natalie's voice rose again. You've been pretending to be, what? Some struggling startup employee? While actually running a major tech company? Why would you hide that from your family? The irony of her outrage after just declaring I wasn't family anymore wasn't lost on me. Maybe because I wanted to be valued for who I am, not what I have, I said quietly. Clearly, I was right to be concerned. Jason's parents were now looking at me with open curiosity and, more tellingly, respect. The same people who had barely acknowledged my existence an hour ago were suddenly finding me fascinating. You must tell us more about your company, Mrs. Bennet said warmly, as if we were old friends. Jason mentioned something about a government contract? Perhaps another time, I said, forcing politeness into my tone. It's been a long day, and I should really head back to my hotel. Hotel? Nonsense, my mother interjected. You should be staying with us. Why didn't you say something about all this success, Amelia? We've been so worried about you, all alone in New York. The sudden shift was dizzying and infuriating. 10 minutes ago, I'd been the family disappointment, the one who didn't belong. Now, with the revelation of my financial success, I was suddenly worth keeping around. Amelia, Natalie said, her voice softer now, I didn't mean what I said earlier. You know how I get when I'm stressed. Of course you're family. You'll always be family. I looked at my sister, really looked at her. Behind the perfect makeup and carefully styled hair, I could see calculation in her eyes. Not just the obvious reassessment of my worth now that she knew about my money, but something more specific. Will you stay? She asked, reaching for my hand. Please? We have so much to catch up on. And I'd love your input on some of the wedding plans. With your eye for design. She trailed off, the implication clear. My eye for design. Or my wallet? I was saved from responding by the arrival of Megan, Jason's sister, who had been watching the scene unfold from a distance. Everything okay over here? She asked, her gaze sharp and evaluative. Looked like quite the family conference. Everything's fine, Natalie said quickly, her smile tight. Just a little misunderstanding. Amelia was about to leave, but she's decided to stay, haven't you? All eyes turned to me expectantly. I felt trapped between the satisfaction of finally being acknowledged and the knowledge that it was for all the wrong reasons. Part of me wanted to walk away, to return to my life in New York and leave them all behind. But another part, the part that still longed for family connection despite everything, wavered. I'll stay a little longer, I heard myself say. But I do have an early call tomorrow, so I can't be too late. Relief washed over my mother's face, while the Bennets looked pleased at having averted a scene. Natalie's smile didn't quite reach her eyes, she knew she hadn't won me over completely. As the group dispersed, Megan lingered behind. Interesting how quickly the wind changes direction around here, she murmured, just loud enough for me to hear. I couldn't help but agree. The question now was what to do with this newfound appreciation from my family, and whether any genuine relationship could be salvaged from the wreckage of tonight's revelations. The remainder of the party was surreal. Where before I had been largely ignored, now I found myself the center of attention. Relatives who had barely acknowledged me earlier suddenly had urgent questions about my life in New York. My mother hovered nearby, interjecting with proud comments about my important technology company, as if she'd known all along and had been my biggest supporter. Amelia has always been so clever with computers, she told Mrs. Bennet, who was now treating me like a prized acquisition. We always knew she would do something special. I caught my father's eye across the room. At least he had the grace to look somewhat ashamed at this revisionist history. Natalie had shifted strategies entirely. Gone was the angry sister who had publicly disowned me, in her place was a woman determined to act as though our confrontation had never happened. Amelia, you simply must meet Jason's colleague Dr. Wilson, she gushed, steering me toward a distinguished-looking man in his 50s. He sits on the hospital board and was just telling me about their outdated security systems. I thought of you immediately. The transparent networking attempt was almost comical. I made polite conversation with Dr. Wilson, who indeed seemed interested in secure health solutions, but my heart wasn't in it. Every smile felt forced, every handshake a performance. So, 78 million valuation, huh? Jason appeared at my elbow as Dr. Wilson excused himself. That's impressive for someone your age. The valuation is actually higher now, I said, not bothering to hide my discomfort with his sudden interest. But it's not really about the money. Of course not, he agreed quickly, though his expression suggested otherwise. It's about innovation, creating something meaningful. I get that, it's why I went into medicine. Somehow I doubted that was his only motivation, but I nodded politely. You know, he continued, lowering his voice, Natalie feels terrible about what happened earlier. She's been under so much stress with the wedding planning, and she sometimes says things she doesn't mean when she's upset. She seemed to mean it at the time, I observed. Jason shifted uncomfortably. Family dynamics are complicated. But now that we understand more about your situation, I think we can all move forward on better footing. Now that we understand how wealthy you are, he meant. Now that we see you might be useful to us. Maybe, I said noncommittally. If you'll excuse me, I need to use the restroom. I escaped to the relative sanctuary of the ladies' room, leaning against the sink and taking deep breaths. The woman looking back at me from the mirror seemed like a stranger, caught between the person I'd become in New York and the role my family still expected me to play. The door swung open, and Megan entered, looking relieved to find me alone. There you are. I've been watching the Bennett-Wright alliance circling you like sharks all evening. She leaned against the adjacent sink. How are you holding up? About as well as can be expected, I admitted. It's amazing how quickly people's attitudes change when they discover you have money. Tell me about it, Megan said with a wry smile. Different situation, but same principle. In my case, it was when they realized I wasn't going to follow the Bennett family path into medicine. Suddenly I went from golden daughter to family oddity. What do you do? I asked, realizing I didn't actually know. Environmental law, she replied. I work for a non-profit that sues corporate polluters. Not exactly the prestigious career my parents had in mind for their daughter. But meaningful work, I said. Exactly. She studied me for a moment. Can I be blunt? Please. They're going to try to rope you into financing things. The wedding, probably. Maybe more. She tucked a strand of hair behind her ear. Jason mentioned that Natalie has been dreaming of a destination wedding in Italy that they can't quite afford on their own. I sighed. I suspected as much from the sudden interest in my eye for design. Just, be careful, Megan advised. Once you become the family bankroll, it's hard to go back. Voice of experience? Let's just say I've watched it happen in my extended family. Money changes everything. She straightened up. Anyway, I should get back before they send a search party. But listen, I'm in New York fairly often for work. Maybe we could grab coffee sometime? No ulterior motives, I promise, just seems like we might have some things in common. I'd like that, I said, surprised to realize I meant it. After Megan left, I took a few more minutes to collect myself before returning to the party. The remainder of the evening passed in a blur of forced smiles and superficial conversations. My parents kept finding reasons to mention my successful tech company to anyone who would listen, while Natalie made pointed comments about wedding venues and how wonderful it would be to have a family celebration somewhere truly special. By the time I finally made my excuses and left, thankfully without another scene at the coat check, I was emotionally exhausted. The drive back to my hotel was silent, my mind processing the whiplash of going from family outcast to prized asset in the span of a single evening. Back in my hotel room, I kicked off my heels and collapsed onto the bed, only to be interrupted by the buzz of incoming messages on my phone. 3 texts from my mother, 2 from Natalie, and surprisingly, 1 from my father, all variations on how lovely it was to see me, how proud they were of my success, and how we should talk more in the coming days. I set the phone aside without responding. Tomorrow would be soon enough to navigate these newly complicated waters. For tonight, I needed space to process what had happened and what it meant for my relationship with my family going forward. As I drifted toward sleep, Natalie's words echoed in my mind, "You're not family anymore." Followed so quickly by, "Of course you're family. You'll always be family." The question was, on whose terms? And at what price? Morning brought no clarity, only a steady stream of messages from family members who had suddenly rediscovered my existence. My mother had texted 3 more times before 7 a.m., each message more effusive than the last. "Good morning, sweetheart. Just checking if you're free for brunch today?" The Bennetts mentioned they'd love to continue our conversation from last night. Translation: the Bennetts now see you as a valuable connection, and we don't want to lose momentum. Natalie's message was even more transparent. "Hey sis. Can we meet for coffee today? I have some amazing wedding ideas I'd love your opinion on. The Amalfi Coast has always been my dream location." I left all the messages unanswered and ordered room service instead, buying myself time to think. As I picked at my omelet, my phone rang, my friend Sophia from New York, right on schedule for our weekly Sunday call. "How was the engagement party from hell?" she asked without preamble. Sophia had been my first friend in New York, and one of the few people who knew both my family history and my current success. "Even worse than expected, then dramatically better in the worst possible way," I replied, launching into the story of the previous night's events. Wait, Sophia interrupted when I got to the black card revelation. "So your sister publicly disowns you, and then does a complete 180 when she realizes you're loaded? That's some next-level hypocrisy." "To be fair, she didn't know about the money before," I said, surprising myself by making excuses for Natalie. "That makes it worse, not better," Sophia pointed out. "She was willing to cut you off when she thought you had nothing to offer her. Now that she thinks you can fund her dream wedding, suddenly you're family again? That's not love, Amelia. That's opportunism." Put so bluntly, it was hard to argue with her assessment. "So what do I do now? Ghost them all and go back to my life in New York? Is that what you want?" I considered the question seriously. "No," I admitted finally. "Despite everything, they're still my family. I guess I always hoped that someday we could have a real relationship, one based on mutual respect and understanding." "Then maybe this is your opportunity," Sophia suggested. "Not to buy their love with your black card, but to establish some honest boundaries. They've seen a glimpse of who you really are now. The question is, can they accept the whole truth, not just the parts that benefit them?" After we hung up, I sat staring at the unanswered messages on my phone. Sophia was right, this was a crossroads. I could retreat back to New York and maintain the emotional distance I'd established years ago, or I could try to build something new from the wreckage of last night's revelations. After deliberation, I texted Natalie, free for coffee at 2 p.m.? Just us. The hotel cafe. Her response was immediate, absolutely. See you then. The hotel cafe was neutral territory, not my parents' house, not anywhere associated with the Bennetts. Natalie arrived 15 minutes early, already seated with 2 lattes when I came down from my room. I ordered your favorite, she said brightly, pushing a cinnamon latte toward me. At least, I hope it's still your favorite? It's been so long since we've really talked. I sat down across from her, noting how perfectly put together she looked even in casual Sunday attire. Thanks. It is. An awkward silence fell between us. Natalie fidgeted with her engagement ring, a sizable diamond that caught the light with every movement. So, she began, her voice overly cheerful, I've been thinking about the wedding. We're looking at next June, and I was wondering if... Natalie, I interrupted gently, I didn't come here to talk about wedding planning. Her smile faltered. Oh. Of course. What did you want to discuss? Last night, I said simply. What happened? What you said. She had the grace to look uncomfortable. I told you, I didn't mean that. I was stressed and upset, and you know how I get when I feel cornered. Do I? It's been years since we've had a real conversation, Natalie. I don't think either of us really knows the other anymore. She sighed, dropping the bright facade slightly. Maybe that's true. But you're the one who moved away, Amelia. You're the one who stopped sharing your life with us. And why do you think that is? I asked, keeping my voice calm. Because you were focused on your career. Which, apparently, has been much more successful than you ever let on. There was an edge to her voice now, resentment mixed with confusion. I didn't share my success because I wanted to be valued for who I am, not what I have, I explained. Last night proved my concerns were valid. The moment Jason saw my black card, everything changed. Suddenly I was worth acknowledging, worth including. That's not fair, Natalie protested. We've always loved you. Have you? Because less than 24 hours ago, you told me I wasn't family anymore. What changed, Natalie? What exactly made me family again? She flushed, unable to meet my eyes. You took what I said too literally. It was just an argument. It wasn't just an argument. It was the culmination of years of feeling like I didn't belong, like I wasn't enough because I didn't fit your and mom and dad's idea of success. I took a deep breath, determined to remain calm. And now that you know I am successful, by conventional standards, suddenly I'm worthy of being included again. That's not how it is, she insisted, but her protest sounded hollow even to her own ears. Isn't it? Tell me honestly, if Jason hadn't seen my card, if you still thought I was struggling with my little startup, would you have texted me this morning about wedding venues in Italy? Natalie stared into her latte, unable to formulate a convincing denial. I thought so, I said softly. Look, I'm not trying to make you feel bad. I just want honesty between us. I want a relationship with my sister that isn't based on what I can do for you or how I make the family look. It's not that simple, Natalie finally said, her voice small. You don't understand the pressure. Mom and Dad have expectations. The Bennetts have expectations. This wedding needs to be perfect, and yes, it's expensive, and when I found out you could actually help instead of being another financial burden. She trailed off, realizing how her words sounded. Another financial burden, I repeated. Is that how you've seen me all these years? As a potential drain on the family resources? No. I mean, I don't know, Amelia. For the first time, Natalie's perfect composure cracked. We always worried about you, all alone in New York with your startup that might fail any minute. Mom and Dad are getting older, and their savings aren't what they should be, and I just... I took on the responsibility of being the successful daughter, the one who wouldn't ask for help. I softened slightly, seeing genuine vulnerability in my sister for the first time in years. I never asked for help because I didn't need it, Natalie. But I would have liked support, emotional support. Interest in my life. Respect for my choices, even if they were different from yours. I didn't know how to give that, she admitted. Your world seemed so foreign to me. And maybe I was a little jealous that you had the courage to leave, to build something completely your own. This admission surprised me. Jealous? Of me? But you've always had everything, the perfect career, the perfect relationship, mom and dad's approval. And the perfect cage, she said quietly. Do you think I always wanted to be a nurse? To marry a doctor? To live 20 minutes from where we grew up? Sometimes I wonder what would have happened if I'd had your courage. We looked at each other across the table, truly seeing each other perhaps for the first time in our adult lives. I'm not going to pay for your wedding in Italy, I said finally. Not because I can't afford it, but because that's not the relationship I want with you. I don't want to be your ATM, Natalie. I want to be your sister. She nodded slowly. I understand. And for what it's worth, I am sorry about what I said last night. Whether you believe me or not. I want to believe you, I said honestly. But trust takes time to rebuild. We can't fix years of distance in one coffee date. So what now? She asked, uncertainty in her voice. Now we decide what kind of relationship we want going forward. One based on honesty and mutual respect, or one based on appearances and expectations. I stood up, leaving my half-finished latte on the table. I'm heading back to New York tomorrow. Take some time to think about it, and let me know. As I walked away, I felt both drained and strangely liberated. For the first time, I had spoken my truth without filtering it through the lens of what my family wanted to hear. Whether it would lead to healing or further estrangement remained to be seen, but at least I had been honest, with Natalie and with myself. The flight back to New York felt like crossing more than just physical distance. As the plane climbed above the clouds, I found myself reflecting on how much had changed in a single weekend. The careful walls I'd built between my two lives, family Amelia and CEO Amelia, had crumbled, leaving me to figure out who I was without those divisions. Back in my loft apartment, I threw myself into work, finding comfort in the familiar challenges of leading my company. My executive team noticed the difference in my demeanor, a new openness, a willingness to bring more of myself to the table. You seem different since you got back from that trip home, my COO remarked during our weekly meeting. More, integrated somehow. The observation was surprisingly accurate. Having my worlds collide, painful as it was, had forced me to stop compartmentalizing parts of myself. I was no longer family Amelia or CEO Amelia, just Amelia, with all my complexities and contradictions. I started seeing a therapist, something I'd considered for years but had always been too busy to prioritize. Dr. Levine helped me untangle the complex web of family dynamics and expectations that had shaped me. Your worth isn't determined by your productivity or financial success, she reminded me during one particularly breakthrough session. And it's not determined by your family's approval either. Then what is it determined by? I asked. That's what we're here to figure out, she replied with a gentle smile. Meanwhile, communication with my family continued in fits and starts. My mother called frequently, still oscillating between genuine interest in my life and thinly veiled references to Natalie's wedding plans. My father, surprisingly, sent thoughtful emails asking about my work in terms that suggested he'd actually researched what my company did. Natalie and I exchanged occasional texts, surface level at first, but gradually growing more substantial. She sent me a long email 3 weeks after our coffee shop conversation, acknowledging patterns of behavior she was trying to change and expressing a desire for a more authentic relationship. I've been thinking a lot about what you said, she wrote. About wanting to be valued for who you are, not what you have. I realize I've spent most of my life defining my worth by external validation, from mom and dad, from Jason, from society's expectations. I'm trying to figure out who I am beyond all that. It's harder than I thought it would be. I read honesty in her words, even as I maintained healthy skepticism about how deeply this new awareness went. People don't change overnight, especially when they've spent decades building their identity around certain patterns. 4 months after the engagement party, I received a call from an unexpected source, Megan, Jason's sister, who was in New York for a conference. "Remember when I said we should get coffee sometime?" she said when I picked up. "Well, I'm actually at a coffee shop on Fifth Avenue right now. Any chance you're free this afternoon?" We met at a quiet cafe near my office, Megan in a sharp business suit that spoke of courtrooms and legal briefs, me in the casual but expensive attire that had become my CEO uniform. "So," she said after we'd exchanged pleasantries, "has the dust settled from the great engagement party revelation?" I laughed despite myself. "Somewhat. We're in a recalibration phase, I guess you could say." "And has Natalie asked you to fund the Italian wedding yet?" Her directness was refreshing. "Not directly," I admitted. "But there have been hints. Lots of links to Amalfi Coast venues sent just for inspiration." Megan nodded knowingly. "Jason mentioned something about how they're reassessing their priorities for the wedding. I think he was hoping I'd offer to contribute, but unfortunately for him, environmental lawyers at nonprofits don't exactly rake in the big bucks." "Have you always been the family rebel?" I asked, curious about her path. "Pretty much. I was supposed to be a surgeon like Dad, or at least marry one like your sister is doing. Instead, I spend my days suing companies like the one my father has half his retirement invested in." She shrugged. "Family dinners are always interesting. How do you handle it? The disappointment, the judgment?" Megan considered this. "I decided a long time ago that I could either live my life to please my parents or live it to please myself. Since I'm the one who has to wake up every day and look in the mirror, I chose the latter." She stirred her coffee thoughtfully. "That doesn't mean I don't love them, or that it doesn't hurt when they don't understand my choices. But I can't make those choices based on their approval." Her words resonated deeply. "I've been trying to figure out what kind of relationship I want with my family going forward," I confessed. "Part of me wants to maintain the distance I've created, but another part hopes we can build something new, something healthier." "Maybe it's not an either/or," Megan suggested. "Maybe it's about establishing boundaries that allow you to be authentic while still being connected." As our conversation continued, I found myself drawing strength from Megan's example. Here was someone who had faced similar family pressures but had forged her own path without completely severing ties. It wasn't perfect, but it was real, and there was power in that authenticity. The wedding invitation arrived 2 weeks later. Not an invitation to Italy, but to a ceremony at a beautiful but reasonably priced venue near our hometown. The note enclosed in Natalie's handwriting surprised me. "We decided we didn't need the destination wedding after all. What we need is to be surrounded by people who genuinely care about us, not just our status or connections. I hope you'll be there. Not as my personal ATM, but as my sister. No strings attached." I read the note several times, trying to gauge its sincerity. Was this genuine growth, or just another strategy? The cynical part of me wondered if they'd simply calculated that a modest local wedding with my genuine participation was worth more than an extravagant Italian affair funded by my reluctant checkbook. But perhaps that was unfair. Perhaps Natalie, like me, was trying to evolve beyond old patterns. The week before the wedding, I found myself back in my hometown, this time staying at my parents' house despite my initial reservations. The visit was awkward at times but punctuated by moments of surprising connection, like when my father asked thoughtful questions about cybersecurity over breakfast, or when my mother confessed that she'd always been intimidated by computers and had projected that insecurity onto my career choices. "I didn't understand what you were doing," she admitted as we sat on the porch swing one evening. "And it's easier to dismiss what you don't understand than to admit your own limitations." Small steps, but meaningful ones. The wedding day arrived clear and beautiful. As I helped Natalie with final preparations, Our interactions were tentative but warm, two people trying to build a bridge across years of misunderstanding. "Thank you for being here," she said as I adjusted her veil. "Not just physically, but, really here. Present." "I'm trying," I told her honestly. "We both are." The ceremony was lovely in its simplicity, and during the reception, I found myself surrounded not by status-seeking relatives asking about my company's valuation, but by a small group of genuine friends, including Megan, who had become a regular presence in my life since our coffee shop meeting. "Quite the transformation from the engagement party," she observed as we watched Natalie and Jason share their first dance. "Less spectacle, more substance." "I'd like to think we're all evolving," I replied. Later, as the evening wound down, I found a quiet moment with Natalie. "Beautiful wedding," I said sincerely. "It felt like you. The real you." She smiled, a genuine smile that reached her eyes. "That's the highest compliment you could give me." "I'm still figuring out who that is, exactly, but it feels good to stop performing and start living." "I know the feeling," I said. We weren't miraculously healed. The patterns of a lifetime don't disappear in a few months. But we were building something new on the ruins of old expectations, something that might, with time and care, grow into the kind of relationship I'd always hoped for. As I flew back to New York the next day, I reflected on how far I'd come since that fateful black card moment at the engagement party. The revelation of my success hadn't fixed my family relationships, nothing that superficial could. But it had cracked open the door to honest conversation, to seeing each other more clearly. True family, I was learning, isn't about shared DNA or financial support or living up to each other's expectations. It's about accepting each other's authentic selves, flaws and all. It's about growing together even when that growth is uncomfortable. Sometimes it's about walking away to find yourself, and sometimes it's about coming back on your own terms. My black card hadn't bought me family love, nothing could. But it had inadvertently started a process of truth-telling that was far more valuable than any luxury purchase. And for that unexpected gift, I was genuinely grateful. What's your experience with family expectations and authenticity? Have you ever had to establish boundaries with loved ones to be true to yourself? Share your thoughts in the comments below, and don't forget to like and subscribe if this story resonated with you. Remember, your worth isn't determined by others' perceptions or material success, but by the courage to live authentically. Thank you for joining me on this journey, and may you find the strength to be unapologetically yourself in all your relationships.